Hi, and welcome to another episode of Content Marketing and today we're going to be talking about content marketing and the Oscars. One of my personal favorite times of the year is Oscar season. Not only just to watch it and see the see what actually wins is considered the cream of the crop of this year. I'm a movie buff at heart, always have been. But I also like Oscar season to mainly complain about what doesn't win, how what movies should have won, how the action movies are always discredited, the comic movies are always discredited because they're comic movies and never have a real chance of winning. This year is no different. I'll try and stay away from that kind of topic. But my goal here is actually to try and stay in line with my about 10-minute mark and not go off too much of a tangent. So let's just go straight into this. So before we even go into the Oscars, I just want to go into a little bit of the movie business. So you got to think about this. The first priority of any movie when it gets made, the producers, the whole team behind it, is to make money. It's that simple. People are always complaining about sequels, about remakes, and they're always wondering, why did they make this? It really discredited the original one. Yeah, they don't care. They're trying to make money. It's a business. You'd be doing the same thing in their position. Something I learned when I interned at Sony was just that fact. When I complained about why do they keep making these sequels, and their producer's answer was quite simple. Well, it keeps making money, so I'm going to keep making them. But this kind of comes back to the quality has to be there, not just for winning awards and things like that, but if your movie is good, you will make more money. Okay, or if it's entertaining, depending on your definition of what good is. Some people don't like action movies, they think they're stupid, but if they're entertaining, they will make money. So, let's go back into the 90s here, okay? Will Smith was the biggest thing in Hollywood at the time, alright? Independence Day came out, one of the highest grossing movies of all time. Still is to this day, alright? That was in 1996. Next movie, bam, bankable star again, let's throw Will Smith in there, Men in Black, boom. Huge success. Once again, made a ton of money. 1998 came around, they made Wild Wild West. Yep, if you're hearing crickets, it's because most people, if they did see it, thought it sucked, it was terrible. Now, although Wild Wild West actually did make a little bit of money for the studio, when you look at the numbers, it didn't make nearly as much as Independence Day or Men in Black. Can anyone think of what the difference was? Quality. It wasn't a good movie. Independence Day, Men in Black, both really good reviews. To this day, people still love watching them. They're still quoted. Sequels have been made for Men in Black. The sequel to Independence Day is coming out this year. They were good movies. All right, they just look, poll audiences. They really got good reviews. Wild Wild West did not. Okay, so although they all technically made money for the studios, look at how much more money they made when quality was there. Okay, now let's move something into a little bit more into movies in the past few years. People were starting to look at what formulas would create successful box office and could create a lot of money for the studios. So let's do one. Johnny Depp being eccentric. So let's take Pirates of the Caribbean. It wasn't supposed to be nearly as big as a hit as it was back in like the mid-2000s there, but it made a lot of money, and Johnny Depp was just bankable. All right, all the Pirates of the Caribbean movies made $2 or over $1 billion, really successful. All right, so let's put him in another eccentric role in The Lone Ranger. And I know, that'll definitely be a success. Not quite. I think it lost about $100 million. Huge failure. Alright, so now let's go on to the other thing that's getting really popular. Comic book movies. Alright, it got to the point where if you made a comic book movie, it was going to make a lot of money for you. And this was mainly the case with a lot of the Marvel movies. Every time they made one, it was a big success. DC was having a little bit more trouble. Green Lantern was kind of a failure. But let's not get off topic. Fantastic Four came out, and people assumed this was going to be a big success because Marvel had just been doing hit after hit after hit. Even Guardians of the Galaxy, a really random, out there comic book that people had not really heard of if you weren't into comics, made a ton of money. Okay, but then Fantastic Four came out and bombed about the epic scale that Lone Ranger did. We're looking at around the $100 million mark again of losing money. So, looking at both these movies, what do they have in common? Well, for starters, you might not have seen either of them. That's probably part number one. Number two is they weren't any good. Alright, reviews were terrible. Alright, let's look at the Johnny Depp. Alright, Pirates of the Caribbean, amazing reviews, did really well. Because it had such great reviews and people loved it, people talked about it, and more people went to go see it. Same thing with Lone Ranger, though. It was terrible. Nobody liked it. Fantastic Four, if you look at the using Rotten Tomatoes, like 9% of audiences like this movie. All right, so what were the studios doing here? They're getting really into just rushing it, trying to copy a formula of, okay, comic book movie based on a very famous comic should equal success, right? No. What was the problem? Quality. Okay, so step number one, now we're going to get a little bit into the Oscar talk, and the point of my whole episode today was step one, if you really want to make a successful movie, I mean a lot of money, you have to create quality. All right, now I know everyone has their own opinions of what good is, but even in the realms of action, action movies and comic book movies, you have to take time to create the story, develop characters. That's what people want. Even in their action movies now, they want quality. Okay, and if you do that, you'll have success, sometimes in relation to your budget. So let's look at Birdman, movie from last year. Didn't get a lot of buzz when it first came out, but the reviews were there, and it was really, really strong. All right, people were loving this movie from the beginning. And that just kind of snowballed, and the money started to pour in. And why did it start to pour in? Okay, because of Oscar season. This movie was released back in October of 2014. And again, it got good reviews right off the bat, but it wasn't getting a lot of box office draw. And, not a lot of people were talking about it. But then in late January, the Academy Awards released their nominations, and Birdman was all over the place. Wasn't expected to win yet, but it was doing really well. So, the buzz started to come in. People started to search for it. You can see that little uptick here in Google Trends, end of January. And then end of February came around when the Oscars were announced, and Birdman won a bunch of awards, more importantly, the Best Director and the Best Picture. All right? And so because it was such a good movie, and it managed to win, the Academy Awards, still the epitome of, the movie award seasons, it started to get a lot of search volume around it. And the financial success around this came with it. All right, this might not look like a lot of money compared to comic book movies, or action movies, but the budget for this was relatively small, and this was huge success. So looking at these numbers, you can see the uptick in revenue I got from box office right after the nominations and right after the Oscars. And look how consistent that revenue was. And that's really, really cool to see. And it's because it was such a good movie that it was able to get this kind of tech. Now keep in mind, this was released back in October. The movie was already on DVD at this point. That's when I saw it. Watched it on demand. So even with that, people were still going to the movies because of that recognition that they got from that award seasons. Okay, so let's go into winning an Oscar and what that means for your movie. We know that it means success. We know that it always will create more box office for your movie if you can win one of these major awards. So studios know this. So if they're trying to make a movie that isn't for, comic movies' goal isn't necessarily to win an Oscar. It would be great. I think in the future these movies will start getting recognized because otherwise people are not going to be as interested in the Oscars. But that's a topic for another time. And the key is that when people sit down, like, okay, our goal here is to win an Oscar. Okay, this should be the same thing with your content marketing strategy. What is your goal of your piece of content or of your campaign? All right, and you want to create for that. All right, this is not an official checklist, but this is kind of a joke from just looking at this, like 2014 Oscars when Argo won Best Picture. It was taking a look at what sort of things tend to win Best Pictures and how many of these categories do these films fit into to try and predict the winners. This one wasn't quite accurate because Argo won when maybe something like Silver Linings Playbook or Beasts of the Southern Wild should have won. But it's interesting, and movies that cater towards these checklists are called Oscar bait. All right, so it can be as, very specific here, like, based on a true story, always does well, tugging at the emotional heartstrings, a tragic moment in the world's history. These are all things that Academy Award members love, and they were rewarded for it. So when people are trying to make a movie to win an Oscar, that's what they do. They go through they go through their own version of a checklist. I'm sure that they do this and try and create a movie around that to win an Oscar, because that can create long-term revenue, long-term success. And winning these awards is a really big deal for these movies. So I encourage you to make a list almost like this when creating your content. Look at what's important, what do your audiences like, and try and hit as many of those elements as possible in creating your content. And then, here's the most important part, and a very important part of the Oscars, is promoting to the right people. I'm going to go a little over time here, a little over my 10-minute goal. But this is when PR comes into play. Okay? a lot of people might not know this, but when you win an Oscar, you have to go through a lot of steps. You actually have to submit your movie for screenings for the Academy viewers. You have to like submit CDs if you're talking about trying to win something for music or score, submitting screenplays, things like that. You have to go through a process in order to do this. You have to promote to the audience. And there's a lot of regulations. Just type in Oscars regulations for nominations, a whole page of these things. And you have to stick to these pretty adherently. So when they're making a movie, after they've made it and they want to promote to it, they have to have a very specific PR strategy in order to appeal to them. And that's why sometimes movies win that people were a little shocked about. It's because they might have had some really good PR behind it, really kind of sent the right, set up good screenings for their audience members, really kind of talked up their movie. This is people voting, and that's what they're doing. So they're promoting to the right people, and that's exactly what you have to do with your content marketing. You have to find exactly who those right people are, and you got to promote it, all right? So, just having a great piece of content, as I always talk about, isn't necessarily enough. All right, you have to get that out there. All right, in the past, we've talked about, paid promotion and things like that, but also just some general PR. Who are you promoting to, and actually start sending them your content. Let them know about it. Get it out there. Create your own guidelines for how you should be submitting your type of content to people. In conclusion, take a note out of the Best Picture playbook and start creating, for your consideration campaigns, if you will. And what's the goal of that? Maybe it is to win your own industry award, which is a really big deal, all right? People who win those awards, I'm in an agency, people who win those awards, it's all about submitting yourself and having a good submission and talking about yourself that win those awards. So just things to keep in mind. I'm really looking forward to the Oscars this year. And I think there's a lot of strategies and tactics that you can take from how people not only create content for the audiences, but how they promote to the right people in order to achieve their goal, in this case of winning an Oscar. All right, thanks for tuning in. Sorry I went a couple minutes over my usual time, but I will talk to you next week.